My name is Kimberly Brown, pollinator expert with Metro Beneficial and Pollinators Incorporated. I'm here to educate your planners and managers on the value of insects and the ecosystem services they provide. All right, let's begin with addressing some of the challenges in saving insects. Insects get a bad reputation for being pests, when only about 1 to 3% of the population actually are. Many people just don't like bugs and associate them with negative emotions such as dislike, fear, and aversion. This is especially true of bees, with people seeing them as a danger and fear of being stung. I get it, it's a lot harder to want to rescue the fluffy polar bear on a melting ice cap than an endangered beetle. Knowledge on ecosystem services provided by insects is also very scarce and often biased. Traditionally, insects are viewed as providing disservices to humans through pest and parasite outbreaks rather than recognized for the roles they play in the ecosystem. Currently, we are experiencing a loss of rare taxa as well as an extensive decline in our once abundant insect species, with annual decline rates between 1 and 2%. That's a lot. This is a worrisome number, as insects make up a large portion of the planet's animal biomass. They also link primary producers and consumers, and often higher level consumers in both freshwater and land-based food webs. A decrease in insect diversity could lead to a decrease in the amazing ecosystem services that we depend on. In fact, the annual value of ecosystem services provided by wild and native insects is estimated to be worth about $57 billion. These are just some of the services we are aware of and the difference insects make. So we have dung burial. Dung beetles' activity results in a 19% decrease in the amount of time dung makes forage unpalatable. It also helps decompose dung into liable forms of nitrogen. We have pest control. It's estimated that insects are responsible for control of 33% of pests suppressed by natural controls. Pollination. 15 to 30% of the U.S. diet is a direct or indirect result of animal-mediated pollination. So this can include, other than insects, things like bats and hummingbirds. Wildlife nutrition is the last one. So insects are a critical food source for many birds, fish, and small mammals. 43% of the order Aerosoriformis is primarily insectivorous, and 25% of major commercial fish species are insectivorous during at least one life stage. So when there's less insect diversity, there are many negative impacts. The ecological services discussed earlier on the slide become threatened and disrupted. There are negative effects on wild plant diversity, crop production, and food security. The impacts harm more than just the humans as well. It would lead to a loss of food sources for many birds, reptiles, amphibians, and fish. There are many stressors that are currently impacting insect populations. These include land use change and habitat loss, and a lot of this happens through deforestation, as well as loss of native plants during those processes. So when they lose those areas that they call home, they can no longer stay there, and they will either migrate somewhere else or they will die off because they're not able to adapt to new places. We have climate change. Global warming ties into this, as well as storm intensity. Agriculture. It can be the scale of the agriculture, the nutrient input, monoculturalization. Introduced species or invasive species. This can lead to competition between the native species and the alien species, as they're called, and a lot of times it ends poorly for the native species. Nitrification. Pollution. Multiple pollutions are impacted on these insects, including chemical, light, and sound. Insecticides and herbicides are a major stressor. Parasites and pathogens, which can cause diseases to the insects. And then urbanization, which we'll discuss on the next slide. And I just wanted to mention that the stressors can actually occur simultaneously. So for example, if you have storm intensity from climate change, that storm intensity can affect the agriculture of like different crops that are being grown. If a bad storm comes through, it can ruin that crop for the season and things like that. So they can be affecting at multiple times. I wanted to go into more detail on urbanization. So as we reside in an urban area, I thought it was important to see the effects that the urbanization causes on insects and pollinators. Urban warming plays a role in shaping wild bee communities. Abundance declines With warming, 41% fewer bees were captured in a study for every degree Celsius increase in average site temperatures. It was also noted in a similar study that impervious surface cover, which would be like pavement, cement, and things like that, were negative predictors of bee abundance and richness because they're not able to live in those areas. Urbanization also causes habitat fragmentation, which means big chunks of habitat are cut into smaller disconnected land patches. So those are just some negative impacts from urbanization. One important thing is that we need to become more accepting of the value that beneficial insects and pollinator species bring to humanity. So between the diversity of insects and their key ecological roles in ecosystems, the economic and non-economic benefits provided by these insects through many different ecological services may actually be more helpful than harmful. So the disservices that we think they cause are not as valuable as the services that they do cause. The value of many ecological services provided by insects, such as pollination, is actually widely accepted in financial, food security, and health terms. Valuing services can encourage and promote future research on them, and we should do that through increasing financial support and societal engagement with the pollinators. So if we don't want to see future declines in insect diversity and services, our communities need to become part of the solution. So these are some solutions that could help with pollinator diversity and beneficial insects. So first, we should provide educational programs with focuses on pollinator conservation and other provided services. This could reduce the perceived danger of insects through removing misinformation and supporting interests in the species. We also need to make sure that people understand and recognize the ecological, economic, and scientific value that insects provide to ourselves and the environment. We need to implement policies and practices to prevent pollinator declines relating to a range of issues like specific insecticides, agricultural control, and things of that nature. There are actually some different acts in place. In the United States, we have the Agricultural Improvement Act that was enacted in 2018, and it annually provides millions of dollars for pollinator research and conservation across the United States. So we need to make sure we're making good use of that fund and putting that money to where it needs to go to research pollinators, as well as different ways that we can conserve their habitats so that we can keep their numbers up. Additionally, practices that we perform such as grazing, burning, and pesticide use should be modified to protect the insect biodiversity. So for example, when using pesticides, you should use targeted pesticides that target a specific organism, or you can do small treatment areas and space out your treatments so that you're not just spraying a bunch of pesticides into a specific area. We should also adopt behaviors that diminish drivers of insects and biodiversity declines. And that is my presentation. I hope this has helped to persuade you on the value of insects as well as the ecological services they perform. Thank you.